welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. This is a podcast dedicated to educating and empowering women from preconception, pregnancy, birth, and through early motherhood on wellness lifestyle. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton. I'm a maternity pediatric chiropractor, functional medicine practitioner, and mother who has hand-selected experts in natural, holistic healthcare specialties to shine light on options and choices during this exciting phase of a woman's life. And today's topic is Invisible Load, Real Burnout, Understanding the Emotional Backpack Moms Carry. My special guest is Stacey Uhrig. Stacey Uhrig is a Certified Trauma Care Practitioner and Rapid Transformational Therapy Practitioner. She's also the host of Flip Your Mindset podcast. With a strong commitment to supporting others on their healing journeys, Stacey utilizes various modalities, including parts work and polyvagal theory, to help individuals heal unresolved emotional wounds, build confidence, reconnect with their sense of self, and develop resilience. As an adoptive mother and an advocate for trauma-informed parenting and personal growth, Stacey creates safe and empowering environments for authentic self-discovery, personal development, and long-term well-being. You can find more information out about Stacey at her website at flipyourmindset.com or on the social at flipyourmindset.com or Stacey Uhrig, and that's Uhrig. Hi, Stacey. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
So today's topic is Invisible Load, Real Burnout, Understanding the Emotional Backpack Moms Carry. I know this is a topic that's going to really resonate with a lot of the moms listening because this is a real thing that is almost universal, I think, with motherhood. Yeah. So I'd love for you to just start off telling a little bit about yourself and who you are, and then we'll dive into the topic.
Sure, absolutely. So I am what's known as a non-clinical trauma care practitioner. So that means that I hold space for people that are coming to me often with burnout or in some form of stuckness. But as a non-clinical practitioner, I'm not looking to pathologize. So pathologize means I'm putting a label or a diagnosis on what's coming to me. I'm really helping the person actually trying to tune into their body and get them to start to put language to how this stuckness is showing up in their bodies to start with, and how it's impacting what they're thinking, feeling, seeing, experiencing in their lives that's keeping them stuck.
Wow. And that is fascinating how you really specify the non-clinical part, because you do have degrees. I mean, you're not a coach, right? Can you talk about your education?
Actually, I'm a coach. So, it just depends on where you get certified, right? So the first place I got certified, the first certification was trauma recovery coach. And I think the next place that I went to further, dive in, they changed it to this trauma care practitioner because for whatever reason, coaches get a bad rap. I think they think people only have like a weekend's worth of training. And, even my first coaching certification, that was almost a year long. And it was just a heavy, deep dive into everything and anything having to do with trauma. And how do you hold space, AKA coach, somebody that is carrying this experience of trauma inside their nervous system and in their mind and body. So it is a type of coaching. I do not have an MSW. I did not go to school for psychology. However, I'll say my degree's in speech pathology and audiology. And I always said I missed my calling. I always said, gosh, why didn't I get a degree in psychology? I should have been a therapist. So when I started hearing, really, it was like a whisper that I needed to be in this space in some way, shape, or form. And I really investigated all the different ways that I could hold space for people, one of which was to get an MSW. There was a lot of restriction that was going to come out of me having my therapy, being a therapist. I would only be able to work with people in the state I was licensed in, which would likely be New Jersey. As a coach, I can hold space for people worldwide, which I do. And I love the fact that we look at, and I think this will speak to you as a chiropractor, we look at the human experience and the human body and the adaptation that we make as humans to our environment from a place that impacts their mental well-being and their emotional health. And when I work with therapists who come to me that become my clients, a lot of the things that I'm trained in they've never been exposed to. And they say, this has been the missing link for me. I've been trying to therapy my way out of this anxiety, this burnout, this depression, whatever it is. But there was a missing link. And that's just not something they were trained in. So I'm really glad I actually took the path I did. Because, and I was in therapy for 20 years myself. Every single person in my family's been with a therapist. I'm not anti-therapist at all. But I think that they hold space for something very specific. And they're really great with like a CBT or a DBT, where we're really working with this front part of the brain that's higher level. But trauma really sits in this lower part and this more primal, primitive part of our brain. And really, we're trained on that and what's happening in the amygdala and the hippocampus, and then dropping down into that vagus nerve. That keeps people stuck.
Yes, 100%. So Stacey and I met at a book club event when you were talking about the Lethem theory. You were leading the group, and you were talking a lot about the nervous system, which is not something that I do hear therapists speak on very often, but it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, especially the vagus nerve. And then when we spoke afterwards, I was like, yeah, this is a big part in helping people shift their behavior, shift how they're responding to their environment, right? Because if you're just shut down and stuck because of your nervous system, you could know all the great things that you should be doing and shit all over yourself, but you're not going to do them, right?
100%. And I mentioned to you right before we got started, I was working on a talk, and that talk is called Befriend Your Anxiety. And, what you just described is what I'm writing right now in this talk, which is growing up. By the time I was in my 30s and 40s, and I had been in and out of therapy for over 20 years, I had therapists seeking to dismiss me, meaning they were like, I really don't know that there's anything I can do for you. Like, you get it. You have all the knowledge. And I would say to them, but my nervous system, there's a disconnect, because and I wouldn't even say nervous system because I didn't really have that language. I would just say there's a disconnect because I am drowning in anxiety. I have all the knowledge. I have all the gratitude. I have the forgiveness. I have all the things that we're supposed to be working through. I have that. I have the perspective. I can see the bigger picture. I see the gifts that I got from this challenge. Like, all of that's great, but there's a disconnect. And the disconnect, what I learned later, and this is why I'm so passionate about doing what I do, because I don't think I'm unique in that situation. The disconnect is nobody was ever talking to me about what was happening below my head. Nobody was telling me, well, let's talk about what anxiety really is. Anxiety is a word that describes an activation in your body. I'm not one, and I know because I've worked with, hundreds of clients, I'm not one that works with like a deep inner chatter or like an inner critic, but I have a lot of clients that is part of their anxiety cycle. However, someone comes into my session and they say to me, I'm riddled with anxiety. The first thing I do is say, tell me more. How do you know you have anxiety right now? I'm not questioning you. I want you to describe it to me. And they say the same thing over and over again. I have this in my throat. I'm sweating. My heart is racing. I can't breathe. My stomach is a mess. I'm throwing up. I'm having diarrhea. I have indigestion. I'm breaking out in hives. Like, they're having a physiological reaction. And I have a little brain model here, and I pull my brain model down, and we talk about the amygdala, and we say, listen, there's a sense of threat, whether real or perceived, that's going on for you right now. And your body must activate in kind. Your vagus nerve's job is to keep you alive. This is the nerve that runs through every single organ. It's activated for a reason. So let's try to understand that reason. The more we can start to gain that knowledge, the more I can then help them actually gain physical tools in their toolbox to be able to connect and talk and dialogue with their body in order for it to feel seen, heard, understood, and start to create the symbiosis so the body doesn't feel it needs to be in protection mode for them all the time. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. As a chiropractor, we always talk about the safety of the nervous system and how that's essential for really optimal health, right? And how to thrive and have a vibrant existence. Because when we don't feel safe, we will be stuck and shut down, right? And not be able to live optimally. So, with chiropractic, it's really about getting the nervous system more into a parasympathetic rest and digest, which we can do with chiropractic adjustments. The cranial work I do is about optimizing the exit for the vagus nerve so that there's no compression or irritation and it can do its thing. And the work you do is so complementary to this because now it's really helping someone understand why their body is in this fight or flight oversympathetic state. Or I'm sure you've even had people, like there's people that are going through a real major stressor, I'm sure, when they come to you. But what about somebody who's like, my life is pretty good. I don't know even why I have anxiety.
It's more of that, Laura.
Yeah, my bills are paid. I have this beautiful family. I have all the things I need in my life. Why am I still anxious? And that's almost the most frustrating part because they can't pinpoint where it's coming from.
So look, I have a specialty in my practice and a subset of a lot of people that come to me very specifically for narcissistic abuse. I just started in that space a long time ago, and that's always been a part of my client base. And in that situation, we're talking real threats and real abuse. That's very, very complicated and very, very complex. So I hold space for that. However, a large percentage of the people that come to me are coming to me exactly with what you just described. And that's the part that I think really messes with somebody's head. And it's really what messed with my head, right? Because when I've had 2 nervous breakdowns, and my second one was in my 40s, my first one was in my 30s. In my 40s, I was like, I've got a beautiful family. I've got beautiful kids. I've got a healthy relationship with my husband. I have a beautiful home in a beautiful town. I have a great job. Like, what is going on? And, the reality is that, and this is why I'm so passionate. I have a lot of different workshops I do. And one of them is called, What is Trauma Really and Why Am I Stuck? And we talk about, look, trauma is not just what happened. It's not what I call the 3 A's: abuse, aggression, and acts of violence. Those things can be very traumatic. More times than not, I am seeing people who are coming in stuck because it's not what happened. It's what didn't happen, but was supposed to happen. So what fundamental needs, you can think of Maslow's hierarchy: physiological needs, food, water, air, shelter, movement. You can think of the next layer, which is just a sense of safety and security with your caregivers. And then that third layer is love and belonging. What I see the most of is people who are stuck in those 2 upper layers. The sense that I belong in my house growing up and that I was enough, and or did I feel safe with my caretakers? And again, safety does not have to be safety from violence or actual physical, sexual assault or abuse. There are a lot of people who, and this is why I'm so passionate about intergenerational quote unquote trauma, because in many ways, the way we were raised by our parents, by our caretakers, was influenced the way that our parents were raised, and it was influenced by the way our grandparents were raised and our great-grandparents were raised, unless someone in that cycle is a cycle breaker. And so because of that, a parent may be limited in what they're able to give from a nurturing perspective. And when that leaves a child not feeling enough, when we talk about the amygdala, that is a real threat to the nervous system. Of not feeling enough. We are hardwired to be a part of a collective. That is a very primal part of our nervous system. And as we've evolved, that hasn't really evolved, right? It's super primal. So if we ever feel like we're going to be on the outside and not a part of that, in our earliest days as humans would have equaled death, right? Safety in numbers. Don't ever be outside of your tribe, your group, your village, your collective. This was not going to be safe for you because it was just a dangerous time. Our parts of our nervous system are still primal that way. So when we don't feel seen, heard, understood, significant, important, it leaves us feeling not enough. The amygdala doesn't have the ability to determine threats, right? It can't discriminate. So whether or not you're being abused or you're having to run for your life from a bear, or you don't feel enough, it feels like a threat. So when that amygdala is triggered and your prefrontal cortex goes offline, because that's what it's designed to do, and your vagus nerve then activates in your benefit because that's what it's supposed to do. It is a normal reaction for an abnormal circumstance. It's debilitating. So if that's been the case and you covertly, and we talked about this at the book club, learned how to adapt by people pleasing or meeting other people's needs or deprioritizing yourself or not setting boundaries and feeling the need to control every outcome, which by the way, leads to burnout. These are the fundamental primal pieces of burnout. Nobody burns out unless they're in that space. They may not realize they're in that space because it's this method of operation. It's unconscious. It's just happening. You might not see it as such. When you come to me, we pull back the layers and you start to see the reality of the situation. And you get to understand why was that the adaptation that you made when you were younger? What was it that you were quote unquote trying to survive? Right? And again, it doesn't have to be abuse, aggression, or violence. It could just be a mist of dysfunction, which I love to call it, that now is your method of operation as an adult and it no longer applies.
Do you know what you're getting the dad in your life for Father's Day? I remember growing up, my dad was so hard to shop for Father's Day. It was like, what do you get this guy? He's really into like tools and like building things, but he already had all the tools he needed. And so one year I remember my sister and I got him this t-shirt from the Hallmark store that said, not made of money. And because it was something that came out of his mouth on a regular basis. But in hindsight, I'm like, we could have done better than that. So if you're like stumped about what to get the dad in your life for Father's Day, I have some really great options for you. Cozy Earth has some great products that are really about transforming your 5 to 9, the time that matters most, into the most comfortable part of your day. You could get dad bamboo sheets, which are temperature regulating, guaranteed to give you a comfortable night's sleep. They're made from viscose from bamboo. They naturally wick away heat and moisture from your body, helping you sleep several degrees cooler. They also have the all-day tee and the everywhere pant that are really comfortable and have that natural breathable fabric that your dad or your husband would love for Father's Day. So this Father's Day, go to cozyearth.com and use the code WHAM, that's WAM, for 40% off all men's apparel for the dads who work hard during their 9 to 5 and deserve the best during their 5 to 9.
Really pull that back. Do you see where I'm going with all of that?
I do, because I was like, we got to talk about this burnout for moms, and you're really setting the foundation. Yes, you're setting the foundation of where this is coming. Obviously, it could apply to men as well, but yeah, this is so really these, I always, when I'm talking to people in my office, and I do Psych K in my practice, so I am always fascinating with the subconscious mind and these limiting beliefs that are formed the first 7 years of our life as children. And that's what you're really speaking to. It doesn't have to be an overtly abusive, traumatic household that people, these young brains, these young minds are still developing these limiting beliefs, and they're running the show for the rest of our life until we identify them and release them, right?
100%. And, the studies show a lot of different things. Number one, whatever it is we're experiencing in our homes, right, with our caretakers and our quote unquote designated protectors, if you will, anything we experience between the ages of 0 to 9, the only conscious thing that a child can come up with is it's because of me, right? We're just egotistical beings at that point. So, if I'm being abused, I did something wrong. If I'm being assaulted, it must be me. if I'm not enough, if my dad's coming in and my dad has a low bandwidth for life and he doesn't know how to interact and engage, or he gets easily overwhelmed and comes home from work and grabs a scotch and sits down in a chair, and the first thing mom says is, we're not going to talk to dad. I've had plenty of clients sitting on my chair saying, I just didn't think I mattered. Really had nothing to do with the child. This was the dad's incapacity, right? But it's interpreted. That's the interpretation. And it's important to understand trauma is never the event. Trauma is not what happened. It's the interpretation that you made at that time that continues to happen today. It's the current state. And so between 0 and 9, we make the decision, it must be me. Between 0 and 12, it forms what you just said, that belief of ourself. It forms how we view the world. It forms our core beliefs, and it changes how we see ourselves, others, and the world around us. So if we grow up feeling very secure and securely attached, that's going to influence how you see yourself, others, and the world around you. But if that creates an anxious attachment within yourself or something avoidant where you want to hide because you don't feel enough, that also influences how you see yourself, others, and the world around you. When it's limiting, that's the trauma. It's like an unhealed wound, right? And we know there's a lot of studies that show, and this is the tough part, those pre-verbal years, that 0 to 2, the idea is that if you experienced your needs not being met or violence, abuse, and aggression between the ages of 0 and 2, because of that neuroplasticity and how rapidly we're growing, but everything from 3 to 12 is honky-dory, it is more impactful in your long-term life than if 0 to 2 was great, but 3 to 12 was horrible.
Wow. And so now I'm immediately thinking of adopted kids. Like my uncle and aunt adopted a boy from Russia. He was in an orphanage, a Russian orphanage, for the first 3 years of his life.
Both of my children are adopted, by the way.
Okay. And his parents were still alive. His mother had so many children. Nobody really knew who the dad was. So it wasn't even like the parents are dead, right? It's like they're there, but they can't care for you. And so his life dramatically improved coming to the US and being raised by loving parents. But yeah, man, I can't imagine what those first 3 years were like for him.
You know what they were? They were adapting, assessing, and surviving.
Surviving, very much survival.
Right? So when we're stuck in a survival state, we're in a fight or flight. We're in the sympathetic connection. We're in anxiety. Yeah. So I'm so passionate, and nothing makes me tick more than helping people get educated on the body and understand what is happening inside of them that we call anxiety. It's just a word that we have in our vernacular that it describes a series of emotions and sensations in the body. And, over time, this became labeled as a disorder. It's not really a disorder in my personal mind. This is my own point of view. And I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder most of my life. When I was seeing therapists and psychiatrists, it was my body's natural adaptation to experiences I had not properly processed.
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism. I mean, the body is so intelligent. It never makes mistakes. If it's, dysfunctional, there's a reason, right? It's not just like, boop. Yeah.
Right. And so, getting it to burnout, when we are burnt out, what do I hear from my clients? The anxiety's off the charts, and or this is more likely the case, they were in this, heightened, hyper-aroused state. And at some point, the body's like, this is not even sustainable anymore. For me, that took 20 years. And then we drop into this dorsal vagal state that is this hypo-aroused state that looks and feels like lethargy and fatigue and pain and exhaustion and procrastination and no motivation and just a complete malaise that we call depression. But this is the burnout. This is the drop down. I have been at this heightened state. I have been hustling and trying to prove my worth and trying to make sure everybody knows I am enough to be connected with, or I am not enough to be abused, or I am enough to have the attention of my caregivers, or whatever it is. And there's only so long your body can sustain that state of being, and then we drop. And, when that happened to me in my early 30s, I knew I was running in this upper state. And for those women listening, I'm just going to tell you, I called that type A. I'm just a type A person, right? Like, I'm just a go-getter. I'm just these things. I'm not taking that away from anybody, but gosh, it's really important to really get clear with yourself and to really sit down and get quiet, which is really uncomfortable for most type A people. Rest is not restful because our nervous system never stops going. We're always on alert. And at some point, we drop. And when I dropped, I became that lethargy, quiet, couldn't make a decision. My frontal temporal lobe was completely offline. I didn't even know. I could go from doing 100-sheet workbook in Excel to not even knowing what I want in my coffee cup. Just could not make a decision. And the inflammation in my body was extreme. And everything just shut down. I call this a nervous breakdown. Why? Because my nervous system is breaking down in every place, but we socially call it burnout. But how many times do we hear someone say, if it has to do with work, let's say, because that's usually where we really thrive in that hyper arousal. When we're working and we're building our careers, we hear things like, that place was toxic and made me sick. Now, some environments are toxic. Okay. I'm never going to take that away. However, you get to challenge yourself. And I invite people to say, was it the environment or was it the way you were working in the environment? Because usually people leave when they finally get sick. And by the way, they're getting sick and nobody can diagnose them with anything because there's nothing, I'm putting in quotes, wrong. All the labs look normal. All this looks normal or not. I got diagnosed with seronegative rheumatoid arthritis because—
I was going to say autoimmune conditions.
Autoimmune. Listen, somebody comes into my office for an intake and I put a wild range of autoimmunes on my intake. And I think that's shocking for them because they've never been to a mental health practitioner that's ever asked them about their physical health. Guaranteed that somebody's coming to me with an autoimmune condition, usually 80% of the time, at least. And usually it's more than one. I've been diagnosed with 3. I've had Raynaud's since I was 15 years old. Endometriosis, greatly suffered from that for most of my years. And the seronegative rheumatoid arthritis, which honestly I was able to put into remission because I did a lot of internal work, but my body was inflamed and my C-reactive proteins were off the charts. So physically you could see a number that my body was screaming at me, but there was something internally that I knew I have more work to do. My body's not inflamed for no reason. It's literally gripping me the way this anxiety used to. I don't have anxiety now. Now I have physical pain. It's just one replaced the other. So, all of that leads to the label of burnout. It's this cacophony. It's the symphony of symptoms all put together that we collapse and we call it burnout. I call it a breakdown. People don't love that, but that's how I see it. And that happened to me again in my 40s, because when it happened in my 30s, I literally just got up, brushed it off, got myself some meds, and just went right back into the storm.
You didn't do the deeper work then?
No, because let me tell you something. That was the year 2001. I had already been in, I'm putting in quotes, therapy for 15 years. So I'm like, what else can possibly happen? So I had never done medication up to that point. Psychiatry and therapy was not trauma informed at that point at all. It's somewhat trauma informed now, but not really. So I went to a psychiatrist because I was debilitated. And I was told, well, your grandmother had this and your father had this, and this is a long line and it's probably biochemical. So we're going to give you these meds and you're going to feel better. And honestly, I did feel better, until it didn't work anymore because I was putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, right? So it allowed me to widen that capacity and widen that tolerance, but it didn't get to the root cause of why my window of tolerance was so short to begin with.
Got it. So if a mom is listening to you right now and is like, yes, 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 she resonates with all the stuff you're saying, what is something simple she can start with now to help her heal?
I think it's just stopping for 1 second and asking yourselves the questions like, what is it that I'm sensing inside my body, in and around my body? And it's so hard because part of our adaptation is we freeze and we disconnect from our bodies. So a lot of us are not tuned in to ourselves. So my first invitation to people is just to start to tune in and become mindful of what would it feel like if I didn't people please? What would it feel like if I did set that boundary? And when I say feel, it's where do you feel an activation in and around your body that doesn't feel like a safe thing to do? This is where the let them theory came in. And this is why I said it wasn't a mindset flip, it's a nervous system flip. If I think about not controlling this outcome, what happens inside my body? That's the first invitation, because everybody's capable of doing that. Some people might feel so disconnected and so frozen and in that free state that they can't actually sense what's inside their body because they're so disassociated from it. And that is also a sign that there's work to be done.
For somebody like that, I would just get them in front of a body worker, chiropractic, massage, cranial, somebody who's going to start helping you connect your mind, your brain with your body if that's been so disconnected. Because we're born connected, right? That's always there. But if it's been shut down long enough, we're like, I don't know what's going on in my body. I can't sense it. I don't know. And body workers can really help you connect that again, that bring back that intuitive connection. Okay. Well, is there any last thoughts you want to share with the audience to wrap up this call?
I would just say that anybody that this resonates with, please know, I hear too many times people coming into my session saying, I'm so broken and nobody can fix me and nothing works for me. And I've been in and out of therapy and I'm therapy adverse and nothing's worked. And all I'm just going to say is nobody's broken, but you might feel disconnected from yourself. And the goal and the work is to get reconnected to who you are and look at all the adaptations that you in survival made covertly, unconsciously, over and over and over again throughout your life and why. And then we get to sit down and say, do you still need to be in that state? Because when we're no longer in that state of survival, we get to then start to reconnect and build a deeper relationship with our self energy and start to work with the parts of us that have kind of been leading the pack and get them to be more in harmony with us versus running the show for us.
Well said, Stacey. How can people find out more about the work you're doing?
You know, my website is called flipyourmindset.com. And so that's a great place to go because I share a lot of resources there. But the place where people love to go the most is honestly my Instagram, which is just my name. It's Stacey Uhrig. And, you know, I use my social media and specifically Instagram 100% as a psychoeducational tool for other people. So everything on my Instagram is designed to help you gain more insight and more awareness into who you are and where you're stuck.
I love that. This is so empowering for all the moms listening. You know, anyone out there who you are feeling stuck, you really resonate with the story that you shared of the burnout and the, you know, emotional breakdown. Essentially, there's an opportunity when there's a breakdown to break through, right? Like we almost have to get to that place to be like, I am not willing to live my life this way anymore. It has to change. And motherhood really inspires that because it's not even just about us anymore. We have these littles to take care of and caretake. And, you know, we're modeling this life for them, right? So we want to be our best selves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Stacey, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Stacey. You know, as I shared in the podcast, when I met her at the book club, I was so impressed with her ability to really take complex concepts and make them simple and usable and applicable for real life, and really just kind of getting the confusion about how our brains make things much harder than they really need to be. So recognizing that our childhood directly impacts our parenting, and so there's so much opportunity there when we're finding ourselves getting triggered to kind of dig deeper and get the garbage out of the basement by doing this type of deeper work. And it will, number one, impact our overall health and well-being and connection, but also certainly everyone around us, including our children. And we're actually able to break these generational cycles of trauma as well. So it's a very, intense but awesome opportunity to kind of break those patterns and create a different story for ourselves and our children.